I know that the Netflix adaptation of Avatar The Last Airbender has been a mixed bag for some people, where they liked some things that it did, but also they disliked some things that it did. But for me, if there is one thing that I absolutely do love that this adaptation explored, it is everything around the character of Lu Ten, Uncle Iroh's son, and how there is a very open conversation and commentary about loss and what war will do to you because of that loss. That is what today's video is going to explore and talk about. My fellow benders of all four nations, welcome to Uncle Iroh's tea shop, the Jasmine Dragon. Find yourself a seat, grab some jasmine tea, and enjoy the video. Let's see if we can hit a goal of 200 likes for this one. So like I just said, we are going to talk about the character of Lu Ten and what he has meant to this adaptation of Avatar The Last Airbender, because to me, I love that the show does take time to explore other characters that you might not have gotten a lot of screen time with in the original cartoon. As an example, take a guy like Lieutenant G. He barely has any time in the original other than the episode of The Storm, where he is involved in the conversation with Zuko's crew about why they have a disdain for him. Here in the Netflix version, he's given way more than that. To the point of why I'm making this video idea, this now stems over to the character of Lu Ten, who is of course Uncle Iroh's son, who he lost during the 100-Year War. A death, might I add, was at the hands of his father's very own siege of the Earth Kingdom city of Ba Sing Se, in accordance with the lore and how it connects with his dad. With regards to the live-action show, there is a big addition to this character with regards to Iroh. The scene in episode 4 where they depict Lu Ten's funeral is truly heartbreaking, and it got me emotional. It was just a great scene and depiction of what loss can do to a person, especially when the loss comes to a war. Given that Lu Ten was also his only son, it's even more heartbreaking. To top all this off, it's never ever truly established in the lore behind his character who his wife was with regards to having the kid, and I imagine it's left up for interpretation that maybe the relationship just didn't work out. So you have this character who is just grieving so much from the loss that he has in his life. He doesn't have a wife, he's lost his son, he's never felt more disconnected from his brother than before, and on top of that, he's just trying to be a good uncle to his grandson, who sometimes he can look at as his own son. The very monologue of words that Zuko tells him in the funeral scene is even better when you contrast it with the loss of what it can do to affect others. He talks about how Lu Ten was someone who was very close to him and how he had given him this medal after receiving first in his class. He told Zuko that it belonged to somebody who is destined for great things, that it gave him strength, and that subsequently, when he gives that medal to Iroh, it is such a beautiful way to paint a picture of someone passing along the idea of someone who could do something great. Iroh receiving his own son's medal that was meant to go to Zuko based on the words that he told to Zuko, in a way is painting the picture of what Lu Ten is giving his father in the medal in order to contrast how Iroh could represent himself to Zuko in a father-son type of relationship, even though they are not father-son related. And then when you finish that off with Zuko telling Iroh that he didn't need the medal because Lu Ten was the strongest person he knew, it's just a gut punch as he sits down with him, representing the fact that there is someone who can be there by his side in this time of loss. Because as you'll notice in the more wider scale shot of the funeral, there are 4 chairs, of which I would assume represent where portions of the family would sit, but given he's the only one sitting there, he might have felt alone in that instance. Zuko comforting him and his loss by sitting down with him is almost like if his son was there sitting next to him, given the words that Zuko passed along to him with that medal. If anybody remembers the very beginning of the finale for the show, as Zuko is about to sneak into the Northern Water Tribe, he and Iroh have a quick back and forth about what to do before he leaves, and there is that mention of Lu Ten. Zuko tells Iroh that Lu Ten would have been proud of him to have him as a father. Iroh embraces him after this, and again, just a great contrast to the scenes prior in the early episode of the season where they had this dialogue with each other about him. I just really love how Lu Ten is always present in this conversation between the two. For those wondering and want to have a recap, these two did have the same exact conversation in the original cartoon before he left, although the dialogue was different. In the cartoon, Zuko is more arrogant to what he is saying to Iroh. However, Iroh is the one who actually mentions his son, and that he apologizes to Zuko for nagging him so much because ever since he did lose Lu Ten, he would always think of Zuko as his own. Honestly, depending on how you look at it, I think both versions are beautiful in their own way, whether it was Zuko saying it to him or Iroh saying it to Zuko. I think all around, it's just a great way to tell the story of those kinds of themes, and I apologize for repeating that a lot, but I think it is important to keep remembering this. Again, this is just really deep stuff when you put it all together, and I feel like it's even deeper when when you note the fact that the very sequence that comes before this funeral scene is of Iroh and the main Earth Kingdom soldier who is taking him away to prison, having this conversation and dialogue with each other about how the war affected them through loss. The Earth Kingdom soldier talks about the fact that his brother, who, may I add, was a 19-year-old kid at the time, was involved in the war and was killed during it. He explains how the PTSD follows him to this day, and as he talks about the fact that he still smells the smoke at night when he goes to sleep, and that it never really goes away. His brother had been on the eastern wall of Ba Sing Se when Iroh invaded it, and so again, this is just a really perfect way to tie in the narrative of loss in the war and how it affects people, especially given the connection these two have with each other, given the fact that both their related ones were lost in that battle and siege of that city. I just really love how this was used and how this narrative was put into the show. Again, I get that not a lot of fans were happy with the idea that they put stuff like this in the show with this more grittier look to it, but honestly, it makes a lot of sense given the context and story of what Avatar The Last Airbender is. The idea of the war and the 100 years that it has affected the world is very present through the live-action adaptation in a much more realized sense than what it was like in the cartoon, where it feels like it was more in the background. I just feel like when you contrast these two sequences together, especially given they are literally right after each other, it's just a really good way to symbolize how war and loss can affect somebody, especially when it's close to home. I think that the live-action show did justice to the character of Lu Ten by incorporating him in that way. In the original cartoon, he's just there for the flashback, and then the scenes that involve Iroh singing Leaves from the Vine and Tales of Ba Sing Se. Again, this is why I think it's such a great way to incorporate this stuff, because it's such a good commentary on war and loss, which the show is very present about from the cartoon. It's just that the live-action version went to greater lengths to help communicate that, and I think the filmmakers did a great job to show it in the sequences and those scenes. And again, if you would ever have told me that the character of Lu Ten would exemplify these themes even more through this adaptation, I probably would have called you crazy. I just love how this adaptation goes to give characters that you wouldn't expect much bigger details and broader looks into the lore through these kinds of things. War is not good for anyone, and while this is not about to be a lore dump into why war is a bad thing, I think it is safe to say that the rest of my video did the talking with regards to why that is the case, and the same goes for the show as well. I'm sure lots of people know someone who has been affected by war and loss, and how both can be connected to each other in their own way. Losing somebody to something so unnecessary and ridiculous because opposing sides couldn't agree with each other on something is stupid, and it makes all the more heartbreaking. You always have that thought constantly in your head when you look at these kinds of things. That is why I'm glad that they also touched on the PTSD stuff and what it means to be a veteran dealing with it with that Earth Kingdom soldier, for example. And so overall, I have to give massive props to the writers and showrunners on this portion of the live-action adaptation. I think I've said my part with regards to all of this, and as usual with all my videos, to close off, we get to the most important part of each one, which is now to get your thoughts and comments on everything that I talked about here and my commentary of it. Did you enjoy to the level of how much Lu Ten gets utilized in the live-action adaptation, and did you feel as though those themes were there and present and well done? Let me know down below, and with regards to anything else as well. If you did enjoy this video and you also enjoyed the stuff that we talked about today from the Netflix adaptation, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new here, while also turning on the notification bell to be updated for when I upload again in the future. On your way out of Uncle Iroh's tea shop, be sure to let him know how much you appreciate his jasmine tea and his words of wisdom that come with it. I hope everyone here has a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you all soon for more Avatar.